Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 29 of the Future of Work show. Now, for those of you who've been following us for a while, we have this conversation most weeks, and we've covered a very wide range of conversations, right from what does it mean to build innovative organizations? What does it mean to build liquid organizations? What does it mean to incorporate design thinking into the culture of the organization? And then, of course, we've also had several conversations around integrating technology into the workplace. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the work we do, we have been doing a lot of leadership talks with senior teams. And if you and your organization are also interested in understanding what lies ahead for you around the future of work, do reach out for us. I'm the founder of Uncube, an education and advisory firm specifically focused on the future of work. And my partners in crime are Jaspreet Bindra, who focuses on business and technology, and Papia Banerjee, who works with talent and leadership. Now, with that, the topic for the day. Uh, there are few topics that get everybody as interested as the topic of compensation. And I have with me just the right person to try and understand what the future of compensation holds for us. I'm just going to bring my guest on. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Shalini.
So, a little bit about Sam. Sam is a managing director at Willis Towers Watson, and he used to lead the compensation and rewards team for India, but now is in a global leadership role. He's also the author of an article which he writes annually, speaking to the top five trends of compensation of that year. And that's really how I became aware of the work that Sam does. And I was really excited about the kind of predictions he was making, and therefore just absolutely had to have him on the show. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy you were able to make time for this. You bring with you an expertise that is really one that all of us are curious about. I think while we've had many conversations around the kinds of organizations we're building, but the one topic that gets everybody most interested is, in fact, compensation and rewards, your topic.
Thank you, Shalini. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So, Sam, I know that Willis Towers Watson just very recently came out with compensation trends for 21. And just before we dive into the future of compensation, which is, of course, a much larger subject, do you want to share the top headline items from that report?
So I think, we just came up with our salary increase survey for India and around the world. And in fact, I think 2021 definitely seems to start on a positive note if you're an employee in the company. I think if you remember last year, the pandemic just hit us in about March in India, and a little bit ahead in China and some of the other East Asian countries. But I think a lot of companies around, I would say about more than 50% companies in India froze the salary increases last year. There was a lot of conscious environment. People, employers were in a zone of conservation of capital. But I think from this early survey that we look at, I think 2021 definitely seems to be that almost 85% companies are going to be giving a salary increase this year. Although I think that days of 10% increases in India are gone now. I think it's more around the 6.87% mark. But key point to note is that it really is about the affordability of your company. So, we can predict whatever we can basis the surveys that we run. But I think it's about the company, how much can you afford in terms of giving a salary increase. How did the pandemic impact your industry? I'm sure travel or hospitality industries got more impacted than some of the high tech or pharma companies, and you would association there in terms of the talent trends. It's very important to look at from a segmentation perspective, your high performers versus your average performers. So really looking at this 6.6%, it should not be that it's for everyone. It is the company budget. and then it gets spread out, depending on the affordability, depending on the talent segment, depending on other looking from a total rewards perspective.
Right, right. No, so from what you say, I understand that employees should expect compensation to more or less keep track of inflation if their organization has the, budget for it.
Well, I wouldn't just say inflation. I think inflation, again, you can Google, you can find what the best number for inflation is. There is something that's published versus something, other companies would publish. I would think it's more that you should expect a salary increase based on what is the market rate for your particular job, right? And based on those benchmarks, based on how much impact that you have, your job has been able to make on the organization itself. As an individual, how much contribution were you able to make within that organization? So if the revenues that you as an individual at any level have made an impact which is significantly higher than your competitors, versus the cost base is lower, so you're increasing the profit margin, and hence your cost can go up based on the salary increases. So it's not just about the inflation, because I feel inflation is it has been, it's a 20-30 year old concept that you should give increases based on inflation. It's more now about the impact that you are able to make on the top line and the bottom line of the organization.
Okay. I think I'm beginning to understand, but I'm going to ask you more questions around that, Sam. So obviously, last year was a year unlike any other. And I'm wondering what you think have been the consequences of last year, and in fact, the fact that many organizations are considering returning to work in a very different form, some form of hybrid. Do you think that that has any bearings on compensation?
Was a very different year for everyone. I think all of us got impacted in some shape and form. And I
Yeah.
think compensation professionals, reward professionals, all were right in the thick of action. I think when the pandemic started, looking at the insurance policies, we as employees impacted, a lot of companies started to look at what should be, are my insurance policies enough to cover my employees? I think there was a lot of, I think organizations have done a fantastic job in taking care of employees. I think that was the mantra. They really if they were we from most organizations from and I the digital explosion that happened in the last year has not uh, how do we
Hi, so I think Sam has just dropped off. I think there were some connectivity issues. I'm just going to get him back. I think the sound was breaking up. Gautam, thanks. I wasn't sure whether that was completely at my end. Uh, Let me just bring him back. Thanks for all your patience. Sometimes we ourselves are surprised at the kinds of challenges we have.
Shalin, can you hear me?
Yeah, Sam, we can hear you very clearly now. For some reason, in between, your voice broke up a lot. So we're getting a lot of comments that, people couldn't hear you very well. So is it all right if I ask you to repeat what you spoke about on, the impact of the pandemic on compensation? Sorry about that.
No problem. I think this is what technology makes us happen, and that is what I was talking about. I think the impact of compensation, or the impact that pandemic had on compensation. I think at the beginning, a lot of the professionals started looking at their insurance policies firstly,
Hmm.
to begin with. That can we make sure that all our employees are covered with regards to COVID? I think companies have done a fantastic job of really taking care of employees. That was the primary focus. There was also the focus of how can we conserve our cash, and companies tried and make sure their best that they don't impact employees. But there were a lot of the temporary cuts. There
Yeah.
was not that many headcount cuts, but there were a lot of the temp cuts. And as I spoke about that, more than 50% companies didn't give a salary increase. They
Yeah.
did actually do a little bit of temporary cuts on the pay. um, I think the reward professionals were really looking at what is the best optimized way in terms of their return on compensation cost. We were trying to differentiate between our frontline workers and those that were working from home. We were trying to also look at things which, as the pandemic happened, we all moved from work to home like in a flash, right? And there was a lot of demand of companies, who've been in a very traditional setup. How do you move into cloud? How do you move into all this digital setup? And there was a spurge in those kind of skill sets and demand, and companies started to hire freelancers, started to hire some of those skill sets, and then started paying whatever that was required. I think there was definitely HR and comp was in the thick of action to try and work with employees, to communicate and really able to get the impact of affordability, the impact of how the revenues, if are stalled, how can we continue to pay the same amount. So definitely there was a lot of thick of action. The whole employee well-being and taking care of employees became the primary purpose.
No, I think I would concur. That is exactly what we've also observed with all the organizations who we've interacted with and worked with. I think HR leaders and business leaders through last year have really tried their best to protect jobs as much as possible. And most organizations, obviously, there are exceptions, and we've seen far more organizations give pay cuts or maybe delayed pay rises than those who have laid off. I also like what you said about how suddenly, insurance became, you know, an area of focus amongst many organizations to make sure that their employees were covered for the kind of experiences that they went through last year. Sam, you briefly spoke about the fact that organizations pretty much overnight needed to work virtually, and I think that was an experience all over the world. In 2021, a lot of organizations are thinking of going back, but in a hybrid model. Um, and of course, the hybrid works in many different ways. In some cases, the hybrid just means working a certain number of days from an office location and other days virtually. But in some organizations, the hybrid also might mean being able to hire talent, who can then work from locations which are not locations where they have important, office presences. So, do you see an impact of this virtual work or hybrid model on the way compensation itself gets designed?
Well, I think that's a great question and a great point. I think it will be very hard for most organizations to now just go back to how it started, right? I don't think the days where
Yeah,
offices were designed for a 9 to 5
yeah,
cubicle kind of a setup
yeah,
is going to
yeah,
happen. I think a lot of the collaboration still needs to happen in the office, and
yeah,
I think a lot of all of us miss that brainstorming with the team. There's nothing like whiteboarding in front of them, and I think offices will get restructured as more of collaborative spaces. I think you bring a very important point about talent. You know, most organizations were very restricted with talent based on where they were geographically based, because we never had this kind of virtual setups that we now have been able to get accustomed to. And there was also a lot of the cultural aspect of, if someone's working from home, are they really working, right? But now I think the whole acceptability of working from home and widens the whole talent pool. If you have an office now in Gurgaon, nothing stops you from hiring people in Pune and Bangalore and Hyderabad. And that option was not available before,
right,
because the whole option was that you have to be where the work is. And I think that will open up the talent market a lot. Will that reduce the pricing of the job? That's too early to see. If I look at it from a pure economics perspective, that the supply increases, then the demand, of course, the price should come down. But again, I think the critical skill sets will continue to be hot in demand, and I think that would continue to be there. I think the other important aspect of this is around the whole concept of paying based on where the work is. So
yeah,
now a lot of employees have moved back. For example, someone
yeah,
working in Gurgaon was on rent and now is in his hometown in Jaipur and is working from home. Of course, a lot better lifestyle, a lot better being taken care of, does not have to deal with the rents in Gurgaon. But is the salary justified to be paid in Gurgaon versus that you should be looking at it now from a cost of living perspective? I think early on, the trends that we are seeing, that most companies will not be reorganizing or thinking about that. But I do think there is an opportunity to restructure compensation. In a lot of countries, there is allowances and benefits like company car, transport allowance, conveyance allowance, and those, when you're not going to office, doesn't make sense to have on in terms of your whole compensation package. So I think that will need a relook at. A lot of companies, where again I come back to affordability, if they are not doing that well, they might also look at it from a perspective that can we pay based on where the person is based rather than where the office is, and that may have an impact. But I think overall, I think the availability and the movement of talent and
yeah.
augmenting full-time talent with freelancers, with RPAs, with technology, is going to be a trend that we will continue to see in the future.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're also seeing. I think the whole talent conversation has opened out, and it's actually opened out at both ends. So, on the one hand, it absolutely gives organizations the flexibility, as you said. If you're working in Gurgaon, it doesn't mean that you only need to, work with people who are located nearby. You now have the option of bringing people onto your team who could be located, frankly, anywhere in the world, even. And we all this sort of coincides with the whole trend of flexible work arrangements, of which full-time employment, the way we have seen in the past, is only one format, and multiple formats becoming more and more popular as we move ahead. And of course, this works the other way as well, that it means that if you are the owner of skills or talents which are really in demand, then the number of potential organizations you can work with is much higher than it ever was a year ago. Because, so it opens flexibility out at both ends. Talent becomes more flexible and organizations become more flexible. And I think that's a very interesting trend to see. It'll be interesting to see how this sort of collides with the fact that historically, how much you got paid was impacted by which location you were working out of. And because now location becomes a much more flexible construct than it ever was before, it'll be interesting to see how some of those counterpulls get managed in organizations. Now, Sam, I want to pick up on a point that you spoke about just a while ago. The fact that total wellness has become, a part of the conversation in a way that had never happened before 2020. How does total wellness impact compensation?
Well, as I mentioned, I think, most companies, in fact, I would want to say all companies did a fantastic job of taking care of employees. And I think earlier, this whole notion that, okay, you know what, I will get a 20% increase, 30% increase, I will move to another organization. I was never, had that vetted feeling of being with the organization. But I think that definitely the pandemic has changed, and especially for people who got impacted more than the others. Just the fact that companies were warm enough, the teams were warm enough to take care of whatever needed to. All the kids were at home. There was homeschooling happening. Your parents were at home. Your spouse was at home. There was a lot of things that were going on in your home environment. The work was going on. The flexibility that most managers teams gave them, that you can work as long as the work gets done. That is what's most important, and we don't care how you are dealing with the other aspects of your life. In fact, we were very empathetic, we were very sympathetic to the fact what you were going through. I think this whole thing has, the employees definitely have become a lot more loyal in some shape and form to the organization, and have valued the purpose. A lot of organizations also ran a lot of the well-being programs. If you were sitting at home, or every full day on your desk, there was an exercise that would happen on a Friday as a team. You would do a yoga session, or you would do a Pilates, or you would do something. There was mental well-being issues. If you're not going out, you're sitting all alone, and you don't. There are a lot of folks who are not living with the families. They were just all alone sitting in front of their laptops, and companies gave them a lot of support on mental wellness. Speak up, speak to your manager, speak to your friends. And also on the financial well-being, are we saving enough? Is sitting at home and you're doing online and getting rid of your cash, that's not the best strategy as well. So I feel that whole wellness has taken just from a physical well-being to mental well-being to financial well-being. And again, the whole concept of total rewards is not just around compensation, although we always feel that if I get a higher paid, that's about it. But I think the whole benefits that the companies give, insurance benefits, with regards to medical life, with regards to your careers. So I think it's now a lot more holistic approach of total rewards, and companies really spend more time in looking at that whole wellness and benefit piece, where they did try and cut down on the compensation piece. Some of them did because of just the pure reason to safeguard the interest, that they didn't want to do the cuts of employees, and didn't want to take an action, spontaneous action. They just wanted the pandemic to get around. It's not still got around, but I think people have at least been able to now manage it. It's been almost a year. So we are in a much better position to handle this situation than when we started off. And I think that has a whole different meaning to employees as well as employers around this whole total rewards kind of philosophy, that it's not just about compensation at the end of the day. It's about how the employer really takes care of me.
That's such an interesting idea. I mean, we've always sort of known that, but it just never came under the compensation framework. And I like the fact that you speak about total rewards as a philosophy, where the financial rewards are one aspect of it, but many of the other softer issues, like did you feel taken care of? Did you, perhaps even whether your insurance was good enough, or what kind of wellness programs were introduced by the organization, mental health, physical health, and all of that forming part of your total rewards package. Now, do you think, Sam, this is a trend we're likely to see continue, or do you think this is very linked to COVID?
Well, I think employees have a very short-term memory. So I think, unfortunately, that is the matter of the fact that, people will forget this. And if you are getting a 30-40% increase, you would definitely be considering those options. And the purpose-driven, the loyalty-driven aspect may go down. But from a company perspective, I do think this total rewards concept is going to be be looked. I think a lot of that the whole.
Sorry, Sam, your voice is breaking up a little bit. So I'm just going to take you back to when you started speaking about employees have a short memory.
Yeah, I was just saying employees have a really short memory. So I think when you talked about that, is this a COVID phenomena? So I do feel that all this taking care and everything is, people forget as they start going by in the normal life. But I do think from a company perspective, it's going to be very important to look at the whole concept of total rewards. It's not just about the compensation, it's about the total package, what you are spending on compensation, benefits, on your employee well-being, on the whole part around allowances, and also perquisites, and then also that aspect of training, L&D, career, leadership, all of those, I mean, become part of that total rewards framework. And I do feel that is something that would be of, a lot of interest to companies. I think the future will also be about more personalization. So it's not what is important to me. I can be very passionate and say, what, wellness was really important because I was really down and out and I really needed that. But for you, it might be that compensation was really important because you did want the ends meet, and your partner lost the job. So for you, compensation was more important. For me, wellness was more important. And how does this total rewards framework for companies become a personalized aspect that can cater to your needs and my needs? And that is what the whole framework would be in the future. And I think this needs to continue. It's an evolving kind of a framework where personalization will be very key.
No, and just hold that thought. I'm going to read some of the comments. I think this is such an interesting conversation around what personalization will even mean. Let's see what our viewers are saying. Umesh says, Harvard experts say some of our adaptations have accelerated already existing trends, like the development of a cashless society, the increase in remote work, the decline of brick and mortar retail, and they expect that some of these will become a more permanent part of the post-pandemic's new normal. This is not exactly a compensation question, but your views, your thoughts?
Well, I think, again, I think this acceleration is great, right? I mean, this digital adoption and acceleration we've been looking for and talking about for years, that this is going to happen. And I think as employees are looking at it, and I think are becoming more conversant and are becoming more savvy in this, I think for compensation and HR professionals, the thing to think about is how do we play a role in a virtual environment? HR is very personal. It's the conversation between you and me, and how I know your pulse through emotions, and doing that on a virtual platform is tough. Asking for help on a virtual platform is tough. And how do we take care of that and move now HR and comp and all those conversations into a virtual environment is what we will need to accelerate. But hopefully, as we have accelerated on that digital journey, we will accelerate in this one as well.
No, thank you. Umesh, and our own perspective on this is you're absolutely right. I think many of the trends, workplace trends, as well as cultural trends, have been accelerated by the whole pandemic. So we also don't expect, the world to go back to where it was a year ago. I think many of the shifts are here to stay. Of course, what will be interesting is how they sort of now get integrated into a workplace that has the optionality of many more in-person, meetings and conversations than was the case last year. So I think what we will see is a much more intelligent mix, I'm hoping, of virtual work and face-to-face collaborative work that's able to work to the strengths of each of the formats, and each of the formats do have very, very distinct strengths. So I think some of that is here to stay. Gautam asks, which raises a question in my mind: will organizations move to more permanent work from home policies, and will part of that saving be passed through to employees? That's a great question, Gautam, and it's one, Sam, which I'm also curious about, because many organizations are considering, for instance, downsizing their office premises. Right? So, moving to a smaller location because they are already envisaging a large number of their employees working remotely for at least a few days a week. Do you think part of those savings will be passed on to individuals? In terms of home office infrastructure, are you hearing any of those conversations? I mean, I understand you can't predict.
I mean, every day, actually. I mean, this is definitely a common question that our clients are asking us. Is one is around the whole flexible policy. I think most companies are relooking and redesigning their flexible policies to work from anywhere, work from home permanently, and all of that. And I mean, it's great for employees as well, right? I mean, imagine the commute time that you save
Yeah.
on a daily basis. A lot of people might say, but I put in that much more hours on work, and is work and life really getting balanced, or it's getting more integrated, or I'm working more than I was before? So I mean, I'm not getting my peace time. The whole question about are companies compensating for setting up the home infrastructure? I think some companies are doing that. They are kind of compensating from giving you the bandwidth allowances, giving you chairs are being sent, tables are being looked at. So I think companies, as I said, are looking into it and have done quite a good job. But is that going to happen for all? No, I don't think. It's not a one size fits all. Again, boils down to my whole thing about affordability. If the industry is doing well, sure, your company is doing well, they can afford it. The other part is that they could restructure some of these costs. So I talked about that. There is a conveyance allowance. Right now, instead of the conveyance allowance, they could be a broadband allowance, and you could get that instead of that conveyance allowance. So it might get restructured. It's not that it's going to be a net addition to your compensation. But again, some companies may be looking at that. Okay, fine, I can cut down on my real estate, make it a more collaborative space, and then maybe able to distribute some of those savings as additional allowances. Yes, I think companies are thinking that way.
So, Gautam, I mean, that's a really good question you asked. And I think it's a question many people have been wondering as well. I personally think some form of hybrid is here to stay. It's highly unlikely that organizations at large will go back to the way work was done entirely, just because there are benefits that both have experienced, organizations as well as employees, in the kind of flexibility that we experienced last year. So many mental barriers and cultural barriers towards remote work were completely broken last year. And I think there's also this realization that working remotely has many advantages. Most organizations have experienced, unless they were supply constrained or there was, a demand issue, they've experienced a rise in productivity. And, whether that's because of the commute time going away, or whether it's because there has been a greater opportunity for distraction-free deep work. Um, there have been very surprise, to the surprise of many organizations, productivity gains pretty much across the board. So for productivity reasons and the fact that having tasted this flexibility once, most employees or many employees want some combination of in office conversational work, where they do collaboration, innovation, etc., along with some space for working remotely. So it was a very important question. And Sam, I understand that all of this is just evolving as we speak, and these are conversations which I am sure across many organizations will be happening over the next several weeks and months. That what form will the hybrid workplace take in our organization, and what sort of implications is that going to have uh, for whether there are any cost savings that get passed on, etc.
Right, and I think companies are evolving, right? I mean, we are all learning. There is the concept of team A versus team B. Not everyone going into the office at the same time. As you said, there is going to be some form of hybrid. What works for that particular organization? It can't be a one size fits all that everyone moves. But there could also be certain roles that will work from home permanently as well. It's again for the organization and for the organization to decide what will work best for them, for best for their productivity, and best from their business perspective. So absolutely, I
Yeah.
agree that it's going to be a hybrid and concept.
Sunil, thank you for joining us. Sunil's question is, this is in relation to Indian IT industry. People today with 2 to 8 years experience are able to get between 30 to 100% increases and are negotiating sorry, 4 to 5 offers anytime. In this context, does wage bill hike mean anything?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the whole part about the IT industry going, is going very strong, and the demand for that skill set is there, is because of this whole work from home. The skill sets around cloud or Python or some of those have really skyrocketed, and hence the prices have gone up a lot more, because I think again it's the demand and supply. The demand of these skill sets are much high than the supply. Not to say that it will not catch up, right? I mean, there is always demand that is going to be catching up to the supply. I think the whole conversation that we had, that now the whole talent market opens up. It's not about just Bangalore having Bangalore IT people. You could be hiring a person in up north for that job. Based on the skill set, or even out, right? We could hire it from Malaysia. Why only India would be your talent base? So that all will drive your costs low in the longer run. In the shorter run, companies are looking for short-term fixes, and they will need these talent, and hence the job prices are going up in that. But I think salary increases and market job are two different concepts, right? The salary increase, we're talking about an annual cycle that is run, that basically tries and manage your inflation, as Shalini you were talking about, or manage in terms of your contribution to the organization, and in terms of the affordability. Market trend and market pricing is very different. It's based on what is the value of that job externally in that market. So you could be for your own organization, an R&D person is going to be really important, but that doesn't mean that the market is paying for that R&D job. So there is that internal value of the job and an external value of the job. And I think what you were talking about is more of the external value, which is very market driven from a demand and supply side of things. So I do see IT again being in hot demand for in the near future, but I think supply will be catching up with the demand.
Sunil also has another follow-on question. The assets companies were giving were taken back on exit. What do you think about assets like tables, chairs, etc.? Should these be taken as cost of onboarding? I suppose this has to do with the hybrid model, and wondering if there are any trends emerging on this, Sam.
Well, I think we talked about this, and if I understand this, assets means the desk and the chairs and the computer screens and all that. I think many companies have shipped them, have made them available to their employees. But again, I mean, if you say that okay, this is going to be a hybrid model, will they again have to buy new things so that they can leave it at home? I mean, these are again, from an employee and an employer perspective, these are to me a little bit of the finer details, right? It's not that important for an employer. You are the one who's most important. It's not the assets that you bring or the company provides. It's the value that you are giving to that organization, and that's the price that the organization values you and pays to you. These infrastructure are must to do your business, and in every form they will be able to provide that. So if they feel that they need to give you a screen at home and at work, I think they'll work that out. I don't think that is really the minute details are not to be stressed over, is what I would feel.
But Sam, is this a conversation? Like, have you heard, you obviously work with so many organizations. Have you heard this as a conversation as yet? That how do we navigate some of this, that in a hybrid model, if you have, say, chairs and tables at home, screen at home, has that started? I mean, it may still be early, so it'll be perfectly fine if you say you don't know.
Definitely early, but at the same time, yes, companies obviously are gearing towards it. So it's not that they haven't. They've always had a lot more assets than they've required. So I think they will definitely be making the best use out of that asset pool. If those cost of assets and providing those hybrid models increases, then of course they will need to make sure that their revenues are increasing by multifold to compensate for that. So I think companies would be looking at from all aspects that how they can better equip the employees to be the most productive selves. So again, I think those conversations are happening between HR, admin, and finance, and they are very smart people, and these things will be figured out based on how the impact would be to the overall P&L of the organization.
Got it. So, I mean, this year is going to be such an interesting year because as things go back, many new conversations are happening across organizations as they're trying to figure out many of the kinds of questions which many of our viewers themselves are asking. That what's going to be the impact of all of this on compensation? What's going to be the impact of all of this on the infrastructure that will be provided? What's going to be the impact of all of this on the way demand and supply of talent changes, and therefore the market prices change? And as you spoke about, that's going to be a key driver as well. So let me go back to a point you brought up, Sam, just before we read some of those questions. So that was around personalization. We've seen that a huge trend this last year has been this conversation around personalization of employee experience. And while it's still a conversation that's evolving and emerging every day, would love to have your thoughts around what does personalization mean in the context of compensation?
Yeah, I mean, it's again a concept that has been there for a while. I think personalization of compensation means, can you structure my compensation the way I would like, based on where I am in my employee life cycle, in my life cycle in general, right? If I'm a 20-year-old, someone who's just looking to pay off my rent and have a decent lifestyle and then have savings, I may want to look at it, a higher fixed or a lower variable, or a combination of that, versus someone who's in the 30s who have starting maybe kids or family. They need a much more higher component of fixed than the variable. And then, of course, your life insurances, your policies, your medicals, everything changes from that perspective. So personalization to me is choices. Can I make the choices that works with my lifestyle around the compensation? Now, it's much easier said than done. It's a nightmare for rewards and HR to run such an exercise and to be able to cater to it. I mean, technology has progressed quite a lot, but to sum up everything, have different variable pay plans, have different long-term incentive plans, have different base salary structures. It is very different. And then the whole concept about that if two people who are pretty much in the same zone may have very different lifestyles as well. Some may want to support their parents and hence need a higher pay versus some may not. So uh, in reality, it's the choices that can companies make those choices for you. But I think the personalization is still a little bit far off in the future. We will get there. I'm pretty sure technology will get us there. But right now, it's about segmentizing a particular workforce into a kind of a persona, as we say in design thinking, where you could say, okay, this is the persona of an ideal employee in the 20s, and can we structure the rewards according to that? And this is a persona of someone in 30s and someone in 40s and 50s and so on and so forth. So I think companies are starting with that journey, and then we'll move into the journey of hyper personalization, where the choice can be for you.
No, I think that's very well said, Sam. We had a similar conversation on what personalization of employee experience will look like a couple of months back, and that was also the experience of our guests. That a lot of our conversation at this point, where we are today, has been around segmentation and looking at differences in needs of different segments of our workforce. But where we are headed, and this is going to be something that's going to be greatly enabled both by data and by technology coming together, is the hyper personalization, where there is the opportunity for everyone's individual differences to be recognized, and compensation and many other aspects of the employee experience getting designed right according to that. So let me come back to the conversation, Sam, around the future of compensation itself. We've seen that performance management over the last, I would say, about 5-ish years in particular, has had this huge debate around, should we have ratings, should we not have ratings. Many organizations have experimented with doing away with one rating and having either a number of different ratings or a more qualitative description of the contribution that you have made, etc. So there's been, even in the performance management space, for instance, this move towards personalization. But what I want to ask you is this. The other counter view that we've heard, and equally so, in fact, is the challenge that when you do away with performance management ratings, how do you work with rewards? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are around what you've been seeing organizations do.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a tough one, right? As you said, there is both sides to the coin. We have definitely seen a lot of organizations move to this rating-less concept of performance, where you would be looking at from a perspective that companies are not going to be rating employees, and it's about the contribution that you have made to the organization. You could have a lot of high performing people, and then how do you then reward them? you know I think for smaller organizations, it's easier to do in terms of the administration of this versus some of the larger organizations. The larger organizations, the budgets are very complex. You have a budget by the organization level, the business unit levels, at the team levels, and it's very hard to distribute that if everyone feels that we have performed to the best. And I think performance is also very subjective from a manager's perspective, from an individual's perspective, and it is very hard to administer. So large organizations who have gone into some of this ratingless conversations, I do see on the compensation side, they will still form kind of a bell curve to make sure that the performance is rewarded accordingly. Because in an ideal organization, you would have some laggers, some really super performers, and in a ratingless environment, sometimes mediocrity actually wins, and that is what you need to be very careful about, because everyone feels they're a high performer. Everyone is feeling that, but you're not able to differentiate that with rewards. The whole big role of rewards is to be able to differentiate. It's a carrot and stick approach, right? You want your high performers to always be there. Not to say that your average performers are not important. They are equally important, because that's the bulk of the organization. But those super performers are the ones who get you the highest returns. And this whole concept about getting the maximum return on your compensation spend is going to be a concept that organizations are going to be looking at in the future. Because for a lot of organizations, especially in the services sector, compensation is one of their biggest costs. And are they getting that? And since you talk a lot about the future of work, I also want to bring in this concept about the future of work, where we are talking about a lot of jobs getting automated or getting augmented with freelancers or through the technology tools, right? So I think in the future, organizations are also going to start thinking about, are these jobs going to get more impacted from technology, and are going to be distributing their compensation spend to say, right, an accountant, for example, the technology may be able to do a lot better job in the future. And if we are not adding more skill sets to the accountant, or not adding a lot more role to it, why would I want to pay him or her a lot more than I would want to pay for a cloud engineer who's very evolving and it's very hard to replicate, or a creative designer who's very hard to kind of replicate in this future of work environment. So I think from our perspective, as we are a lot more analytical thinkers in India generally, we need to be very careful of bringing that creativity aspect to our jobs, and also having this whole mindset about skill building and skilling ourselves continuously to be with this future of work.
Sam, on that point, I want to understand what you think about. Do you see in the future of compensation, pay for skills becoming an increasingly important trend?
I think absolutely, and in fact, we are already seeing that have an impact. So, we have in a key markets started this tool called SkillsView, and what it does is it actually looks at the impact of pay on skills. And what happens is, especially this is very true in technology industry, and I think we were talking about that IT industry and all of that. The skills are changing very rapidly. So although the companies are giving a 30% increase today, but that skill might go away in the next 2 years. And these people, if they are not constantly skilling on the next technology, a big of a problem. Also, I think skills are also about, it's not that, today I have a workday skill and I add another skill so it's not like I keep getting a 10% increase on every skill that I add. So, it is about how that impact of pay is and how I can build that whole skills library within my organization. A lot of companies today don't know the skill set of their people, because we were never able to capture that. I think IT companies have done a fantastic job of it now, but most organizations don't have a skills library in place for their employees and to know what skill sets do they bring. There is also the whole concept about, you have skills and then you have industry knowledge, right? I always give this example about admin assistant in a financial services industry. You always, when you look at the job description, 9 out of 10 times that job posting should have worked in financial services before. But an admin assistant, I mean, if you look at the core skill sets, is project management, is a lot to do with administration management, is to organize, is to do all that. So you can take all these skills, but the role itself requires that industry nature as well. So I don't think we are moving into that as fast from a skills perspective, that companies will start saying, okay, you have project management skills, you have this, now you can do compensation, right? Because those are the core skill set. But in technology, you can do that. You have the C Python, you have this new skill set. Yes, because there is not enough people. I will give you, you can come and work in the bank, and I will teach you how the banking industry works. But I'll give you that premium. So on the technology side, the skills is definitely coming in and are getting that pay. But I think on the broader sense, it will still take a little bit more time, I would feel, since we start getting into that whole approach of industry agnostic and thinking about it from a perspective that true skill sets could lead to a true job, and we break the job down into skills.
Right, right. No, actually, there's some very interesting trends colliding here because, on the one hand, there's pay for skills, starting with technology, because obviously there we're seeing the maximum, challenge in terms of supply and demand of skills in particular, along with the trend to focus on the outcomes. What is it that you can deliver, at the end, and that becoming, particularly in a hybrid kind of work, or what we have experienced through this last year, your outcomes becoming, far, far more important than they were in years. So it's going to be very interesting. I know that 21 is such a fluid year. It's a year where many of these trends we'll see how they integrate. And I know it's a conversation which is actually evolving every day. So it's super interesting. We want to take a couple of questions more. I realize we are coming to the end of our time. Gautam again. Sam mentioned that employers have done a great job of non-monetary rewards, such as mental health support, managing finances, etc. Sam also mentioned that this has led to employee retention, which may not stay that way because of employee short-term memories. My views are: one, employee retention may have been high because organizations were shedding rather than hiring. Two, monetary awards will always be a significant component of value from an employee's perspective. And three, the next gen will inevitably, I think it sort of drops off there. So I think so too, Gautam. I think uh, last year was a very unusual year in many ways. It was a year when I think hiring was lower than it has been in past years, and people were uh, sticking on with jobs unless there was a very clear reason to move on. So that might be short term. And absolutely, I think monetary awards will always be significant. But I also understand what Sam spoke about, that the whole, in the total rewards philosophy itself, it's about emphasizing the totality of it. And then, individuals sort of see compensation as one part of it. And as we spoke about in the conversation around personalization, maybe for some employees, it's all about your net cash take home. And then for other employees, maybe there are other factors of this total rewards philosophy that might be, far more relevant. So with that, Sam, I want to ask you for your final thoughts around where the future of compensation is headed.
So I think like Gautam said, like you said, I think future is definitely going to be more personalization. It's the choices I can make. It's definitely not a one size fits all approach. It is about being aware of affordability and company dynamics. I think a lot of employees do forget that you run for a profit center, and if the company is not making money, it's very hard to pay you salaries, or it's very hard to retain you. But yes, as employees, you have a choice, and you can stick by, or you can leave. Yes, that is definitely there. I think the skills component is going to definitely be a lot more in the future. I think the whole concept about virtual HR, virtual compensation is going to be a lot more future. I think one point we never touched on, which I think is very important, is really this protection of employee data. I think as compensation professionals, we work a lot with really confidential data day in, day out, especially during these times of performance management and review cycles. And in this virtual environment, all this data gets shared in Excel. And I think we definitely need to use tools where they can secure this data. I do see that privacy becoming a big thing in India in the future, and protecting this data is going to be critical.
Thank you. So really well summarized. I will add to that we will be seeing some very interesting conversations around, how the future of the workplace, the hybrid model is going to impact the talent market itself. So if organizations actually start thinking about talent more broadly than they have in the past, and that opens out possibilities of hiring, which now we know is possible, people who are outside, and at the same time, employees, particularly those who have skills that are, in great demand, having the possibility of working with many, many more employees than they traditionally had. So that would be an interesting trend colliding. I understand it's an extremely interesting space, and one which is going to see many, many new trends and many, many new evolutions through 2021. So with that, Sam, we come to an end of our conversation today. Really, thank you so much for coming and giving us your time and sharing so many of your ideas around what you're seeing all around. Super helpful for all of us and all of those who are watching us in understanding where we are in 2021. I'm sure next year at the same time, it would be really interesting to revisit many of our predictions and see which of these actually panned out the way we had thought to. And I'm sure there'll be some similarities and many things different, but we're at such an interesting, fluid space. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Sam. So with that, we come to an end of our show today. If you're interested in the future of work as a subject, do take a look at the 28 other episodes we've done on the future of work. You're sure to find many that match your own curiosity. Uncube works as an educator and advisor in the area of future of work. So if that's an area that you or your organization are interested in, reach out to me, Papia, or Jaspreet, and we'll be very happy to work with you. With that, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day and a great weekend, and see you next time.